What's up, guys? Today we're going to be talking about, bam, The Great Ordeal by R. Scott Bakker. So, guys, this is going to be a Let's Talk spoiler video. So if you're looking for the spoiler-free review of this book, it'll be down in the description. I'll put a link in there for you, okay? This video is basically built for fans of the series, people that love to spoil shit for themselves, and me, yours truly, the guy that's got to get this shit out of his head and into a video. Okay? Okay. All right, guys. So I'm just going to try to jump into this thing and kind of talk about it as it kind of goes down. Now, feel free, and I highly encourage all of you to click away on that keyboard and to, tell me what you thought, how you felt about this book or these sections. And by all means, if I get something wrong, feel free to correct me. But just also know, guys, this was probably the most challenging Bakker book that I have read yet. It's very dense. And at times confusing. Let's just face it. It's not so straightforward, and his stuff just sometimes isn't that way. But this one really, I had to reread a couple sections. So, by all means, feel free to throw your knowledge down in the comments section, guys. I'm probably not going to be able to get everything, like I never do. I cover what I can remember and what really stuck out to me. And then also, I just want to once again apologize ahead of time because I am assuredly going to mispronounce things. And I'm trying, and probably once I get this whole thing wrapped up, I'll sit down and really start to try to pronounce this shit in a way that doesn't make you guys, your ears bleed. Okay? All right. Okay, so this thing starts out, and if I remember correctly, where Esmenette actually is finding her son, the young Prince Imperial Kelmomus, and she finds him alive, right? This is the thing. She wasn't sure about him, but she's found her son, and he's covered in blood. And it's not his blood. But, this is mom. Being mom, right? She just wants to protect her little kid. And, this just is already starting out a little creepy, right? But we all know that Bakker wastes no time kicking it up a notch, because we go straight from the bloody Prince Imperial into the feast. Shrank feast. You guys, I gotta say, just really quick, trying to wrap my head around eating shrank, I was like, I'm sure all of you have probably thought about it. What does shrank taste like? And I couldn't help but just keep thinking of, slippery chicken. I don't even know what the fuck slippery chicken would taste like. Well, I guess it would taste like shrank. This is a very disturbing way to start out your book. I mean, we are starting to get murmurs of that the meat might be changing the men. Like, this is a conversation that's starting to kick up amongst the ordeal men. And then, we're just getting these shots of them feasting, gorging themselves on the meat of their enemy. This is so fucking sinister. It's not just gross. It is sinister. This is dark as fuck. You are now consuming the enemy. Like, and it in some ways, it makes the ordeal men like that much more above their enemy, right? Because they're no longer like this like regular enemy. Now it's just food. They're going out to fucking get their food. It's weird, and you can already tell, like, there's this level of savagery and, like, primal thinking is beginning to, like, really sow itself into the ordeal men. Then we get the one-on-one conversations between Kellis and Proyas, and these are just magnificent. I have always really, really dug the back and forth between these two, because you have, like, the supposed prophet and the guy who's, like, just his life struggle is trying to be this faithful servant, like the, pious Proyas, man. And that is always his struggle, and it just gets worse for him here, because Kellis is really, he's telling him some truth and really shaking Proyas to his core. And this is something that's really hard for Proyas to swallow, and you can imagine, because Proyas is starting to understand if what he was fighting for isn't the truth, then he's not really like this man of God. He's really like a mass murderer. And that's fucked up. And we see how shook Proyas gets when Kellis refers to the God of gods as it instead of he or she. And like I said, this has just got Proyas's head all bound up in a pretzel, and we see him flee Kellis's company. This is when Proyas runs into Saban, and we find out that Saban has also been keeping counsel with Kellis. And we also see that Proyas kind of is almost insulted by this because he wants to be kind of Kellis' special pet in some ways. Like, so when he finds out that Saban is getting special treatment as well, he's kind of taken aback. But I love how Saban kind of hits Proyas back. Like, why do you think that I don't deserve the counsel as well? I share truth as well, brother. And we get a lot of kind of insight between these two. You know, we get the glimpse of Proyas and how he doesn't like how Saban kind of runs his show, you know, there in the Great Ordeal. How Saban basically is quick to the sword and less to spare people. And we even see the glimpse of where Proyas goes in and talks to Kellis about this. And Kellis doesn't give a shit. He straight up tells Proyas, like, I'm not like doing anything about it because I don't care. I don't give a fuck. I'm not trying to produce men that will run a country. I'm trying to produce fucking killers for Golgotharoth. One of my favorite lines from this chapter is just, men are forever famished for what they are not. When I read this was, you know, Bakker has the ability to just smack you upside the head with some knowledge or some just fucking powerful prose. And this is one of those moments, man. It just... reading that was like, slap, oh, so good. Then we move into Sorwheel, Moengus, and Serwa as they're doing their leaping journey to Ishtarenbith. And this is this is kind of fun, but at the same time, it's like in a teasing manner, I guess, because we're just watching Sorwheel essentially be tortured by Serwa and Moengus because they're just fucking each other. And, you know, he's got this thing for Serwa. Like, it's just, can you imagine? You got to travel to this destination, but you got to watch the chick you got a mad crush on fuck her brother the whole way there. Tough times. It is during this time, though, where we see Moengus once again try to convince his sister, Serwa, that there is something wrong with Sorwheel, that he is not the believer king that she believes him to be, that he can see his true face, and she has been deceived. But she just, you know, she won't believe him. She's a Nasarimber, a true Nasarimber. She will always be able to see further than her mad brother, Moengus. Now, when they reach their destination, or at least the gate to their destination, we're kind of introduced to the Enwama, and they're like the deformed people, creatures or whatever, that are essentially now the servants of the non-men. And we get that little like kind of deal where they're entering the maw of the gate. And this was kind of confusing to me. It almost felt more like a portal more than like an actual like doorway or gateway. If anybody knows, let me know, because I've like what I was envisioning is like they'd straight up walk through like some kind of portal. Then we pop back to Momin with Esmenette and the new empire. This is where we see Esmenette is making moves. She's really trying to secure the safety for her children, as well as just her status here in the new empire, because Finale and the Phanom are at her door still. And, you know, Maithanette has died. They're dealing with that fallout right now and, you know, trying to secure that position, trying to gather strength. And during this time, we see that she decides to hire the Narinder assassin on as like a family bodyguard. And this is quite funny considering that the Narinder assassin is no other than the White Luck warrior. This is also where we get Kelmomis, and he's beginning to understand that he's not scot-free from all his wrongdoing, that his sister Thaliopa, or Thiliopa, I'm sorry, I'm going to say Thaliopa. So Thaliopa is, she knows all his bullshit. She knows, and she calls him out on it, and this instantly puts a huge target on her back from her little brother. But this is also when we see Thaliopa decides not to tell her mother about her little brother. She decides that she needs her mother to be as strong as she possibly can be, considering that the wolves are at the door. So she knows her mom needs to be strong in a time like this, so telling her about her little brother is probably a bad idea. So mum's the word. From here, we move into Esmenette's Parlay with Finale, which actually turns into be a trick, a ruse. We quickly find out that it's not Finale, it's actually Meppa, and Meppa is the last Kisharim. But with the help of some Kore bowmen and some schoolmen, Esmenette defeats Meppa, the last Kisharim. Then we shoot back to the Great Ordeal, and this is probably one of my favorite chapters. Like I said earlier, in the beginning, we were getting hit with the murmurs of the Ordealmen and how the meat might be changing them. Well, in this chapter, we're getting more than murmurs. The Ordeal men are just straight up having conversation about this because we are seeing the recklessness, the unpredictability in their behavior. And I love this part that says that this challenge really shows the recklessness of this meat consumption. The challenge between Sorion and Seabull. And what happens from here is just so dark and dastardly and hellish and haunting and goddamn amazing. It's so fucking good. Bakker has a way of taking characters that maybe you didn't even know about, or just like these background kind of nothing characters, and putting them in through a series of events that once you're through that, you're fucking in love with them. This is much like how Saban's, Plains of Mengeta, I really fell in love with a lot of those guys in that battle. Well, surely Sorion and Seabull and the Sepulore really earned a part of my black heart in this fucking chapter. Whoa, let's get into it. We see that the Sepulorian prince, Seabull, is very vexed by his rival, Sorion, and his Famiri riders. Because Sorion, basically, they don't wear armor, right? So they've been kind of highly praised for the things that they've been able to pull off because of the speed at which they ride at. But Seabull really condemns them because he says because they have no armor, they're useless in fucking battle. So there's this like animosity growing between the two. And then the challenge pops up. The challenge is which one of them can lead their men further into the horde. And this is a fucking death wish. It's a suicide mission. Obviously, we're talking about their reckless behavior because the Ordeal men would not be doing this shit, but the meat got their brains all fucked up. So the thing is, Seabull takes this challenge because they know something that Sorion and his people don't, that there's an opening in the horde. So before daylight even breaks, Seabull and the Sepulore have charged into the horde, into this opening. And it is fucking crazy when you start to think about this, because these men are just enveloped by the horde. But they do have a path, but they are going into the depths of which only schoolmen dare to go. So that alone is just like your heart fucking pounding. And you get that point where Sorion realizes, like when he wakes up and he realizes that Seabull and the Sepulore are already fucking balls deep in the horde. It's just like, oh shit. But as badass as this charge that Seabull and the Sepulore are making through the horde, it's too far. And they are in trouble. And we see that they have to make way for refuge. And the only place that they can seek refuge is that place, Rayolith. I think I'm pronouncing it right. Rayolith. And this just turns out to be a fucking nightmare. The only nightmare that will save their lives, though. So when they show up to this thing, we start kind of getting fed little bits of like lore about it. And what it seems to be is just a place that's been all kinds of stamped out by the No God. It's got some very bad juju there. So bad that the Shrank don't even want to step foot on it. And we see that. When Seabull and the Sepulore are just kind of all congregated there in Rayolith, they're actually seeing that they're not being attacked by the Shrank. And as sketchy as it is here, they're at least safe in some matter or aspect. That is until the culling comes, because then we see the mandate, the schoolmen come for the culling, and they don't even know that Seabull and the Sepulore are in the fucking Rayolith. And so when they're culling and casting all these spells, what they end up doing, unbeknownst to them, is pushing all the Shrank in on them. So the Shrank don't want to set foot on Rayolith, but they don't have a choice because they're being killed by schoolmen. So now they're being forced into and upon Seabull and the Sepulore. I really enjoyed this part because it really speaks of the stuff of nightmares, guys. Like, I really was scared during this time. And I didn't even know Seabull yet. I didn't know he was going to become such a big part of my black heart. But this moment with these men is so terrifying for them because it's just, there's no way out, man. It doesn't seem so. And what we see later and like what we hear from them, like the whole deal about being saved by hell, that is fucking dark and fucking dastardly. But I'm getting a little ahead of myself. I do believe it's a day and a night that goes by. And within this time, Sorion is just racked with guilt. and he decides that something needs to be done. So they set out back towards Rayolith when they can find another little break in the horde, and they do. They find Cebalwool and the remaining Sepulore. It's like 923 surviving Sepulore, and they are obviously shook, and they will not speak of what happened. The only thing we get, like I said before, is when Cebalwool says that hell saved them. They were saved by hell. And this is like, we know that there's something just not okay with Cebalwool and the Sepulore. We see when Proyas goes to embrace Cebalwool and he like recoils from him, and there's just, oof, it's just not good, though it is good, right? It's so dark and delicious. This is like where like Cebalwool is really just hitting on all cylinders for a guy like me. I was just like, this was really creating one of the characters that I was really going to grow to love. And I also really love how this is when we begin to get the rumors of Cebalwool and the surviving Sepulore and their presence among the Shrank. It's starting to be told that the Shrank will flee in front of these men. And I love this line where it was like, all fear Cebalwool and the Sepulore. Now, it's also in this chapter that Kellis continues to dismantle Proyas in these one-on-one conversations. And one of the things I fucking absolutely loved, and was kind of a book dropper in this section, was when Kellis hits Proyas with that line that a commune is the prophet that Proyas has been searching for. I had to put the book down. I went straight into my Discord. It was just like, what the fuck? Only to pick the book back up and find Kellis raping Proyas. Oh, fucking poor Proyas. Naturally, Proyas loses his shit, goes running away, seeking refuge with, an unlikely brother, Saban. And this is when him and Saban really put all the cards down on the table and get real with one another. This is when Saban says that this is all a theater and they are all to play their parts. And they begin to discuss the why of those parts. And this is interesting too, because we get that little kind of realization between Saban and Proyas that they come up with the conclusion, it's the meat. The meat is causing all this craziness. Now we finally kick over to a commune in Maimara, and we start off with a commune in a dream, a shared dream, but it's now Coyote's, and now Coyote he's imprisoned in Golgotharoth, and he's being questioned for the Heron Spear. And guys, I gotta say, this fucking Heron Spear better make a fucking appearance, because I feel like it's been hinted at for so many books. I'm like, where the fuck is this spear? Because these people want this shit so bad. They're all like, there is always somebody being interrogated about the whereabouts of said spear. So it's got to be pretty goddamn integral. It's driving me nuts almost. Anyway, so we're finally at Ishwal. I mean, this has been a long time coming, right? And I got to say, when I was reading this book, I actually was impressed. I was like, man, I'm really picking up and keeping and retaining and just soaking this shit up and understanding it totally. Like, I got this. And then I hit this chapter. And goddamn, it fucking threw me for fucking loops. And don't tell me it didn't to you, too, because this is some wacky, crazy, wackadoo, just nutty nut shit, okay? Fucking bonkers. It is fairly straightforward at first before it goes full tilt. We see Maimara in a commune. They're at Ishwal, and it's not what it seems, right? Like, it is a disaster. It's messed up. It's all fucked up. It's destroyed. And we kind of see a commune going into this, like, this train of thought, where he's like, fucking Kellis. Kellis came here. He must have been like, he came to my tower. He read my notes. He knew that I was doing this, and he came here and destroyed everything before I could get here. And he's all fucked up in his head. But then he begins to remember, before giving up on this whole deal, that this is a Dunyan settlement. And so it's not going to be like other settlements. It's not going to be like, it's more than meets the eye, so to speak. They find the entrance to the labyrinth, basically, through the death pits. And this is pretty sinister, I guess. I mean, like I said, it's just, this is supposed to be Ishwal. It's like a very protected, kind of almost seemed like, in my mind, like a sacred place. But we're here, and it looks more like Golgotharoth in my fucking mind. So they find their entrance into Ishwal, and it just gets fucking crazy from here. This is where we're starting to get hit with like some information about the good old Dunyan and how they've separated themselves from paternal instincts and all this other stuff, right? And we get the information on the whale mothers. The whale mothers? Ah, dude, I don't know. I might be, this is what I said. This shit is bonkers, and maybe my head went somewhere that it's not, but because you're talking about, like, genetically engineering the women, right? Like, and they're just, like, big wombs giving birth. Like, basically, like, they are birthing beasts, right? I'm trying to wrap my fucking head around it. It's fucked up. This is also the part where Maimara's judging eye ability is really kicking in, right? And we're understanding as the reader that the Dunyain are pure evil. Like, this was fucking my head up. I started, like, kind of, like, breathing heavy and going, oh shit. Are the Dunyain the real bad guys? They're the worst of the worst, because it's seeming that way now. This is also where we come across the surviving Dunyain, the crab hand boy and the survivor. The survivor's backstory is fucked up, and we do get to learn about that, but right now it's really insane getting smacked in the face with all this shit. To going, like, discovering Ishwal, the finding out about the whale mother genetic engineering shit, meeting the crab hand boy, and then finding the survivor and realizing that it's no other than Anasarimber Kellis' son. Like, fuck. It's just like, bam, bam, bam. You want some more? Bam. Bakker just is punching you in the fucking head in this one and leaves you spinning in the best ways. Then we jump back to the New Empire, and we're picking up with Fanal Cascamandri as he is just losing his shit over, losing his last Kisharim. Like, this is his war gone. His ability to overcome a moment and, get past the walls and win this shit is gone. It's just dust in the wind, and he knows this. And it's fucking ruining him. This is also when Malawibi realizes that he no longer, like, Zeum doesn't need Fanal. Without Meppa, Fanal doesn't really hold anything that Zeum needs. So he's about to make his exit, but he doesn't get away. What ends up happening is he begins to understand that it's not Fanal that's really in control here. We begin to understand that Satma Nana Fairy is pulling the strings. We see Satma bring back the last Kisharim with her, like, sexual blood magic, which I gotta admit, like, I was already kind of creeped out by Satma, but it was in this moment where I really did begin to feel her power, her presence, and she did feel like a threat. She began to feel scary. Then we pop over to our Prince Imperial Kelmomus, who is essentially plotting on his sister's demise when he takes up interest in his mother's Narinder assassin. And Kelmomus becomes kind of enamored with this guy, and he ends up going to the library to do some research after he's been following this guy. And this is where Kelmomus comes to find out that the Narinder is no other than the White Luck Warrior. Now we pop back over to Sorwheel, Surway, and Moangus, and this, guys, I have to admit, this was another chapter that really confused me. For one, I wasn't sure what the fuck was going on. Like I said before, I thought that they kind of entered a portal, and now it's like confusing because they're kind of like being interrogated, right? It seems Moangus and Surway are like bound up and like almost being tortured, while Sorwheel is being interrogated by these questions, and these questions kind of sift through his bullshit or whatnot. And basically what it is it's the non-men's like way of like kind of questioning him to find out whether he's with the 100 or not. And they find out that he is, so he's brought in front of the non-men. This is where we begin to be introduced to some of these non-men characters, because what seems to be happening is like the non-men are essentially holding court of some type, and they're kind of discussing these events, and they're talking about Sorwheel too and like what to do with him, because the mission of the mothers actually seems to be helping them in their mission. So they're more inclined to let Sorwheel just kind of keep doing whatever the fuck he's doing, because it's only helping them. Now, this is also where we see the non-men have decided to assign Sorwheel a Siku, and we get to find out that that is Oiranel. Oiranel will be Sorwheel's Siku. And this is also, believe it or not, guys, the whole Aeolus, or the head prison, this thing was actually pretty easy for me to wrap my mind around, way more than the rest of this chapter. So I just kind of understood it fairly quickly, that when he had this thing put on him, it was like he was being fused with another non-man, like they were becoming one in some ways. That seemed to click fairly well, and I got that. Then we jump back to Mimara and Akamian, and Akamian is once again experiencing the shared dream, but we're getting the one of the prophecy again from a different angle. And then when Akamian wakes up, we see that he's a little shook, and that he knows that they got to intersect Kellis and the Great Ordeal. His new mission now is to get Mimara, bring her and the judging eye, and put it on Kellis. So it's time to go. But it's at the same point that Mimara is beginning to understand the judging eye power more and more. And it's not just that she can see the inherent good and evil and whatnot. It's now that she's also beginning to understand who will live and who will die. And it's at this same time that we get the perspective of the survivor. And, like I said earlier, the survivor's backstory with the crab boy and the thousand halls, and that we understand that there was the attack and everything on Ishwal, all that fighting and just the cuts things, and the fact that this guy's got more scars on him than Nair Erskiotha is just fucking crazy, and just, that much more tasty. And then we get the whole part where Akamian and Mimara are arguing over what to do with these two Dunyain, and it's like Mimara is just trying to convince Akamian that they need to kill them. And that was crazy at first. I did not expect that. I almost thought it'd be maybe the other way around, but we are beginning to understand that Akamian, this prophecy, a new Anasarember, maybe possibly it's Kellis' son. I mean, there's a lot plaguing Akamian's mind 24/7. But this leads us to a scene that is gold. But it's not just gold, it's a lot of insight for the reader into the Dunyain and how they operate, because we see that Mimara convinces Akamian to kill the two Dunyain. So when he's calling Kant into play, we see that the survivor tells the crab hand boy to basically fake like he's terrified, that he's scared and, just mortified of all that's going down. And this is crazy because as the reader, we have like this meta kind of insight to it, right? We have the outside perspective. We know that these guys are Dunyain, and we know, that they use this logic and they're kind of, emotionless and whatnot. But when you see it in play, you know what they're doing, yet you still feel sorry for them. So it's really fucked up when you think about it, because you know that they're faking, but god damn it, they're convincing. So we see that Akamian is about to kill these two, and they're going into this, faker mode that's very convincing. And then we get Mimara screaming, and then boom, into the chapter. Cliffhanger! Now when we go back to Ishtarenbith, we pick up with Sorwheel and his new Siku, Oiranel, and we begin to learn more about non-man history. Oiranel tells Sorwheel about the Ishroi that left Ishtarenbith, went to Minan Roikus, and have come back. And this is what's kind of got some of the non-men, or a specific non-men, not digging what's going on here back at the mountain. This is where we start getting hit also with a past perspective, one of Kellis and Serwa. And this is where he's telling his daughter about what she is going to have to do. She is a clever witch, and there are things that she's going to have to do to Sorwheel and the non-men. And I love this part because this really just adds that much more to Serwa's character. And she was already really strong, in my opinion, like really coming off of the White Luck Warrior. I feel like that book really helped add a lot to her character and made her feel like she stands strong here in the story. And this little bit about between her and her father, because she's not necessarily in this book a whole lot, but that conversation, the bits we get, really add a lot to her character, in my opinion. Like, I just felt like this was just that extra icing on the fucking cake, man. And I really started to think, oh shit, like, not only is Serwa way more powerful than I thought, and maybe even she thinks, but also Kellis is just a fucking madman architect. Like, somebody was talking before in a comment section about him playing chess. Like, this dude is making moves so far ahead of his other moves. It's nuts. Then we jump back over to Sorwheel, and we are kind of beginning to understand even more about the non-men, especially Oiranel, because we find out that he was Nilgeekis's book. And that was a big deal, right? Remember back in the White Luck Warrior, this was a deal that a commune was trying to figure out, and he was trying to become Nilgeekis's new book. So I thought that was a kind of like another boom face slapper from Bakker. But the other thing is we begin to flesh out exactly what Oiranel's plan is specifically for Sorwheel, because he wants to kind of use Sorwheel, especially because he has this power, or at least he has the gods behind him, the mother. He's going to use that to his advantage, and we start to understand more about this whole Weeping Mountain as well as Oiranel's father. And then right before the chapter ends, we flash back over to Serwa and her song, which I love this part because it talks about the song that it tortures the torturer. Now we jump back to the Great Ordeal as they're dealing with Dagliash, the river Sursa, and the very fabled Harsunk, where many bloody tale have been forged. Now, as they cross with the raft, we're getting this whole bit with Proyas as he's struggling once again with all this truth that's been laid upon him. But, you know, I found it really endearing and cool, this little bit where Saban, of all people, kind of goes to him to comfort him. Like, he puts his hand like on Proyas' shoulder, and they're kind of witnessing all this craziness, and we're starting to see, you know, the men of the ordeal they have this like primal fucking urge building in them, and we're starting to understand once again, it's kind of being rammed home to the reader that the meat has really changed the men of the Great Ordeal. I really love this part because it's showing you that the men are really becoming the very thing that they consume. And then we go right into Proyas, who's like a madman. He's just screaming at like Kellis to let him lead the Great Ordeal to victory. And there's kind of that little argument between him and Saban. And it's funny because you get Saban who says, you know, men are reckless with the thing that they hate. And then Proyas fires back, well, what do I hate? And Saban replies, living. And if that's not smacking you upside the dome hard enough as it is, we also get that little bit before the end of the chapter where Proyas is looking at Kellis, and he's just realizing that Kellis is mad from the meat. Then we jump back to the New Empire again, and we're dealing with Kelmomus as he's still spying on the Narinder assassin and really pondering what his relationship with the Four-Horned Brother is, as well as he's still dwelling on his sister Thaliopa and her information on him. Like, he just does not want his mother to know his secrets. So as much as he's enamored with the Narinder assassin, he's also still constantly mulling it over about how he can get rid of and destroy his sister and save his secrets. Now, we also pick up with Esmenette, who is really securing her place here in Momin, and the Zarunyani are beating their chests, like screaming her name, and she is glad to have them, though she isn't stupid. Like, Esmenette understands that this woman that Momin is beating its breast for is not real. Like, it's more of an image than anything, but she's not so dumb that she's going to sit there and count her blessings. She's, like I said, she's glad to have the support. Now, going back to Ishtarenbith with Sorwheel and Oiranel, we're going to descend into the Weeping Mountain, and I have to admit, this was a chapter that really whooped my ass. And it wasn't the Aeolus, it was just a lot. It was hard for me to wrap my head around the surroundings, mostly. There is some crazy shit going on, but when I kind of get to this point, I'll kind of explain it a little bit. But when we start out, right, we're getting ready to go, or we're descending into the Weeping Mountain, and the Aeolus, the prison on Sorwheel's head, the non-man that lives in there that he's bonded with, sees his lover in the dark. And this flushes Sorwheel with all kinds of intense emotion, and it's enough to like really kind of play through to the reader, right? Like, you kind of feel that flush of emotion with him, and at the same time you got Oiranel whipping out his magical sword and fighting back these basically ravaged, scavenged, mad, erratic non-men, right? Right here is where I started to kind of get confused on the setting, because As Sorwheel and Oiranel make their descent, they're like swinging down on Naimal chains, and they drop down onto a vessel, the boatman's vessel. And this is where I was confused, because is the boatman's vessel already in the water, or is it on a chain being like descended down deeper into the Weeping Mountain? I ask this because you don't even hear anything about water till way later, till the mirror, right? So it almost seems like the boat is just kind of descending, and they were swinging along and dropped down onto it as it's descending. Maybe. I don't know. Why is this that important to me? I don't fucking know, guys. I just really wanted to understand what the hell was going on. This is when we begin to get hit with some more information that the boatman is actually the oldest living non-man, and he actually underwent the inoculation like the others, but it didn't take like the others. And this is why he's in the state that he is, because we know that he looks different. He looks like death. And this is because he keeps aging. He might live forever, but he will always age, and he won't keep that like beautiful bald appearance that the rest of them do. So he's an ugly motherfucker, and we know it. Another thing I like about the boatman is that he is naturally deranged, which makes him immune to the dolor, as well as he's the guy that's down here feeding the other non-men. Like, he's what's keeping these people alive, because and it's interesting because it becomes this conversation. Like, does he do it out of penance? Like, he's going where the Awama can't. And I love when Oiranel talks about this place being a labyrinth, and that it could be penance, or possibly it's just within this labyrinth, it's the only path that his feet remember. And this is another like face slapper, man. Like, this stuff is so painful, and it's that tragedy kind of stuff that's very fitting for the non-man race. And it just makes you feel for these fuckers. Now we jump back just real quick to that past perspective of Kellis and Serwa, and he's telling her to pray. And we jump right back to Sorwheel and Oiranel and the boatmen, and we're getting those non-men that are jumping off the cliff, right? They're jumping off, and Sorwheel is talking. He's like, oh, they're suicides. And Oiranel's, no, they can't. They can't be suicides. They're non-men. They can suffer any indignity. And this is pretty heavy hitting. You start to understand. It's like, the non-men have the tragic history, as we were just touching on, but it's now even more tragic because they can't even take their own life and just end it all, right? They're just going to have to keep suffering and keep suffering for all eternity. But this is, again, guys, one of the things that kind of confused me on the setting, right? Because how could these guys be suicide if there was water right there, right? So they must be being dropped down on a chain for some extended period of time. This traveling through the mountain business. They eventually reach Kun Naimil, which is the Great Ishroy mine. And this is interesting because we begin to once again see Sorwheel really reeling in his own thoughts, or maybe they're a combination of thoughts between him and his Aeolus. But we're getting to see that he's really letting the non-man failure sink in. And we get that fucking great line. The wolves have fallen, so what hope is there for mongrel dogs like men? And this is when we get Sorwheel. He's really going in his head, and he's starting to understand that maybe the gods are wrong, and that the world is doomed. They are all doomed. And that maybe Kellis really is the savior. He's their only chance. This is fucking crazy, right? Because you have now, which, you know, up until this point has really seemed to be maybe the one thing that could challenge a Nasarember Kellis because of his power backed by the gods. But now you have the God's warrior. You got him just so bound up in his own shit that he is now believing in the one person that he was sent to defeat. Then we jump back to Serwe and Moangus, and we are beginning to see that the non-man torturer has really figured out how to get to Serwe. Like, he is going to start torturing her through her brother. Like, his pain will now be her torture. Then we cut back to the boatman, and he's pitching pigs off to these non-men and basically keeping them alive. But this begins to be like some kind of conflict brewing within Sorwheel. He's just kind of like, Why? Why keep them alive? Now, when they reach the Holy Deep, this is when Oiranel tells Sorwyll to pray to his gods, and Sorwyll tells him back that he is done praying to the blind. But Oiranel tells Sorwyll to make sure and remind himself that Ninsilgiris has brought the vial back to the mountain. Now, this is key thing for Sorwyll to remember. And then Oiranel tells Sorwyll not to speak while on the mirror, because if he does speak, the boatman will kill him. And the mirror is a cesspit, but this is also finally where it's like, we got water. At least now I feel like we're in the water because the boatman's trying to clear out these bodies using his oar and whatnot. And then we cut back to Surway, and we're seeing the non-man torturer putting the anagogic collar on her. And then we cut back to Sorwyll and Oiranel, and they're searching for Oineryl's father, Oinerys. And we come to find out that Oinerys is what is known as a Tall, and that we know that Oinerys will be here because this is where all the Tall go. Then we get that juicy line from Oiranel where he talks to Sorwyll and he tells him, like, tell me, young king, like, what would you do if you saw your father down here? And this is heavy. Sorwyll thinks about all that, and his answer is shame. But eventually they do find Oineryl's father, and they come across him, and Oinerel calls out, like, hey, it is I, Oinerel, your son. Are you lucid? Oinerel's reply is, my disorder springs but from one thing. Why do you soil my gaze now? This is when we see Oinerys slap his son, and Oinerel grabs his magical sword, but then is killed by his father. Sorwyll is decided that he is not going to abandon his Siku down here, but also being down here is surely a death sentence. As Sorwyll tries to hide, the problem is that his Aeolus is like a beacon of shining light here in the darkness, so he cannot really play this clever game of hide and seek. Eventually, we see that Oinerys finds Sorwyll, and there's that thing. He's just, why? And Sorwyll finally remembers, and he spews it out, because Ninsilgiris has brought the vial back to the mountain. And this is fucking nuts, because we see, Sorwyll gets wrenched in two. And this was a fucking another just stopper. Maybe it happened to you guys too. This hit me a lot like when I read when Confus died back in Prince of Nothing, because when Confus died, it was like, what, wait, who, what happened, are you sure, what? When I read this fucking part where he's being wrenched in two, I had to like read it a couple times over and over, and then eventually I was just like, nah, let's just push forward, because it was like, how in the fuck, man, he's wrenched in two? He's fucking dead? Then we cut back to Serwa, and we're seeing how she's beginning to feel like she has failed. Like, the mission that her father sent her on, she must have fucked it up somewhere along the line, and now Moangus and everyone is paying, and she is just, she has failed. The non-men force her to sing, in which she does, right? And this is an interesting part, because I'm not exactly sure what's going on here, because I thought she had the collar on, and she couldn't sing. Or that she had, like, the gag in her mouth. No, it was a collar. So I'm just confused, because it talks about how, like, she does sing and they weep, and then Oiranel shows up. And this is one of those moments, man. It's a fucking, like, when you see, like, the hottie-toddy motherfuckers come across the dude that's got some real juice behind him, because Oiranel shows up, and they're all just like, oh shit, Oiranel, what are you doing here? They're fucking, all bathing in oil and being all bougie and shit, and here a real motherfucker just showed up, and they're sweating, and, they're just like stumbling over their words and whatnot, and I love that Oiranel is talking about how he's like, he just came from the Weeping Mountain, and he has devoured 10,000 swine, because that's all they're fucking eating down there. But we see Oiranel challenge the other non-men, especially Ninsilgiris, and he starts fucking killing him. And this is great, because it is one of those things, like, these certain non-men, you kind of, like, you've been really wanting to learn about the non-men, but a couple of them, once you've met them, you're like, yeah, go ahead and fucking die off already. Ninsilgiris is definitely among them. But then we also see amongst this whole, like, chaos that Serway almost gets smoked by a Kore, but she does get away with her life still intact. And this is also, when Oiranel shows up, it's she realizes that he has Sorwil with him. So he is torn in half, I guess, but still somehow alive. I don't fucking know. But anyway, he is the one that pulls the collar off of her and tells her to sing. And sing she does. Now, this is really a huge cliffhanger to leave us with. And yeah, I guess I applaud and curse Bakker both for it. But really, after a while after reading this, there's some of this stuff really hit me in different ways later on. It took a couple days for some of this stuff to sink in. But one thing I really appreciate about this chapter, and I just found very heavy, was really the actions of Oiranel. Because, like we found out through this little journey in the Weeping Mountain, that non-men cannot commit suicide, right? They are going to suffer all and every indignity. So, in some ways, though, Oiranel finds a way to commit suicide by having Sorwil bring him to his father, because this is definitely going to be a suicide mission. But in a way, it's the only way that I guess a non-man could ever commit suicide is in an instance just like this. And it's weird. I'm conflicted on how I feel about it. And that's awesome that Bakker has created something like this that gives me such conflict to just kind of sit and stew on, because it's sad. It's sad all over the place, but at the same time, it's almost like a personal victory for one of the non-men, right? Like they have found a way out. They have found a way for peace. They found peace amongst all this suffering, which brings us to Dagliash. And guys, if you've read this, you know. You fucking know. This shit is fucking bad ass. It is so cool. I think Plains of Mengeta is still my favorite Bakker battle, but this shit goes next level and then some, right? And my only thing is I did get confused in this battle, mostly because I wasn't really sure of where these guys were located. The one that confused me the most was Proyas, because before getting to this chapter, I was under the assumption that they were all kind of just in the same spot. But then we open up into this Dagliash chapter, and right away we're seeing schoolmen, and they're fucking shit up, and basically taking control of all the high places. And then we zip over to Proyas and Caiutis, and there's a character I wish I would have got more of out of this series, but it's kind of hard for me to bitch about, I want more of this, when Bakker gives so much else, every other angle in which way throughout the story. It's hard for me to bitch about not getting more Caiutis when I got all this Seabull shit, right? And I love Seabull. So there's an infinite amount of shit for Bakker to play with, so I can't get too mad when I don't see him playing with one of the toys, right? Anyway. This stuff with Proyas and Caiutis is great, because Caiutis he's smart. He's an Anasarimber. He's very observant, and he sees his uncle in, dismay. Caiutis even asks Proyas, "What troubles you, uncle?" And this, comes into that whole deal where he kind of follows up with, You fear you have lost faith in father." And this is kind of a trip for Proyas, because he's looking at Caiutis, who he has known since he was a baby. And then you get Caiutis telling Proyas not to really worry too much, because he's not the only one. In fact, the Anasarimber children have been pondering their father their whole lives. And I love this little line that comes after that when Proyas hears Caiutis and he goes, "Well, what about me? Have you ever pondered me?" And Caiutis just looks at him and he's like, "I fear that you have just become that interesting." But we're also smacked with that realization that they came up with, that the Anasarimber kids came up with, that there is no such man as a Anasarimber Kellis. There is no such prophet. Only an intricate web of lies and deception bound together by one principle: salvation. Then we switch over to Saban and the company of the raft, and they're about to assault these gates. And I love this part because Saban is really basking in the power of Kellis. Saban is going through this kind of mental thing where he's not giving a shit. He knows that Kellis isn't a real prophet or a real god, but he doesn't give a fuck, because he is as strong as one, and that's, strength is all you need. And now when they're assaulting the gates and getting in here, we also come to find out that Saban knows that he and his men are there to defend Kellis and the witches from the Korre. But when we get in there, there's that realization. They're like, wait, there are no Korre. And Kellis is letting them know, no, they're below us. This is also when we're starting to get hit with the different kind of Shrank, the Shrank. And we get that fucking awesome part where, the promise of mayhem is making Saban's groins thicken. And it's just, this is pure meat madness, guys. And it's glorious. They realize that this thing is a trap, but Kellis is kind of laughing at that. He doesn't care that it's a trap. Bring them on. Because his whole tactic is that we will let them fill the field and we will plow it and make the field anew. Then we switch over to Cebawol and the Sepalore as they begin to gallop into the fray here. And this is so fucking cool because we see that the rumors are true. The Shrank want nothing to do with these haunted men. In fact, they actually part from them. They are running away from Cebawol Vaka and his Sepalorian knights. This part is so awesome because basically what's happening, the Ordeal men are watching Cebawol and the Sepalore as they're beginning to make this charge into the horde. And to them, it's a suicide mission. So they're beginning to throw up cheers. They're really like, they're throwing up the fucking huzzah to these men. They're brothers who are brave enough to go out into the fray and, sacrifice themselves for the Ordeal because surely they're not going to live. But as Cebawol and the Sepalorians fucking make their way in there, they don't get snuffed out, right? Because like I said, the Shrank are fucking running from them, and this just makes the men super excited. Some of them get too excited. We start to see fight boners enter the fray, as well as some of these guys are getting so excited they're getting ahead of Cebawol and the Sepalorians and getting lost up into the fucking horde and just getting annihilated immediately. Then we go back to Kellis and Saban, and this is when Kellis is letting them know. He's like, don't worry. They've known I've been coming for a long time. The consult has been planning this forever. They cannot defeat me absent the No God. And he puts a hand on Saban and tells him not to fear for him, old friend. This is kind of when the trap springs, right? And the Shrank just erupt out. And we get that beautiful bit of magic where Kellis casts that spell and we see little geysers erupting out of the chests of Shrank. Woo, dark and delicious. Kellis shouts, I have yet to kick the hornet's nest. And once again, Saban is just enamored with the power that really is Kellis. Like, he just is in this struggle of not giving a shit about the god. He's just like, he's just coming to these realizations. Like, who gives a shit about a god when this man has shown more power, in front of me than any god? And then Saban starts laughing, and which kind of starts them all laughing. And this is a madman sight, surrounded by Shrank just coming at him, and they're all just mad by the meat, laughing. And he even looks at the witch, and he's like thinking of fucking her, and it's just like the most inopportune time. It is pure meat madness. Then we jump over to the schoolmen, right? We jump over to Sacharies, who's been watching this thing out from afar through like a sorceress lens. And we get that little back and forth. We know that Kellis has told him to kind of set up here and keep an eye on the horde because he wants to make sure he knows which direction it's going. And in case, it's making certain movements to alert and whatnot. But Sacharies really has this beautiful view of all the destruction going on. Then we jump back to the Sepalore charge, and we see that Vaka loses. He's like the first one to lose his horse or his pony. And when he gets up, I love the description of talking about his eyes. It's not so much that they it's that they absorb the distance. And he is just such a stunning nightmare of a man. I love his presence here in this story, in this battle. But then he draws his father's sword and he storms into the battle, and I fucking love this guy. And guess what? Death came swirling down. This is really where we start to also get a lot of really beautiful, destructive sorcery descriptions. The tempest of sorceress light destroying Shrank, while you have the Sepalorian knights and Vaka Cebawol pushing in, and then Sacharies is watching from afar through his sorceress lens at all this magical destruction, and then he sees something in the sky. And then we cut over to Proyas and Caiutas, and Proyas can see Kellis shining in the distance. And then we cut back to Saban, who is having this realization while still watching Kellis that the god is a spider, but so is man, and everything eats. We just keep flipping around here, and we get to Sacharies once again, and he's noticing that thing in the sky is Orang. And we switch again over to Proyas and Caiutas, and they're dealing with the water and the bodies in them and everything. It's just, God, pure pandemonium. Then we go back to Sabon, and this shit is beautiful because we get that little kind of past perspective of Kellis telling Sabon that he had raised him above all others because he refused to bend the knee, basically, because he refused to worship another man. And Sabon is really realizing that this is pure madness. What kind of man finds faith after his prophet has claimed himself false? And Kellis is basically eviscerating a mountain. This well has been all dug in, and all the debris and shit that's flying around entombs them. This is when the Bashrag begin to enter the fold, and we're seeing that the meat madness at play, especially between Sabon and his spearmen, and they basically go to town here. And when they do defeat the Bashrag, and when the body of the Bashrag is falling into the well, it's caught by an upward deluge. So the body's falling, caught, and then shot and rocketed upwards. And this is crazy, but it's not as crazy as what else is brought up with that deluge. And we see that Sabon lays eyes on a golden coffer. Then we see Kellis kind of settling in with this golden coffer, and I love how Sabon's explaining it like he's watching Kellis handle it like with care that he has never witnessed before. And this started to kind of send out little like red flags for me. I was like, ooh, ooh, don't tell me what that is. I think I might know what that is. But because Sabon starts to realize it's not gold, and he starts describing this piping and the symbols and whatnot that is on there. And there's this script that's written in light. And that was, again, I'm like, oh, fuck, I know what this is. I know what this is. And Sabon is asking him, like, what is it? And Kellis is telling him it's an Inkoroi object. It's an ancient Techni artifact. And Sabon asks Kellis, what does the writing say? And Kellis tells him that not all can be saved. And this is fucking just, oh man, you like, the anxiety is at an all-time high while reading this part. And then fucking Kellis, like the light coming out of his eyes and mouth, and he's telling everyone to flee. So for me reading this, I'm like, holy shit. He's about to blow up a bomb. Holy shit. Then we pop over to Proyas, and we see that his horse breaks a leg while crossing the river, and Proyas almost loses an eye. And this is also where we see Caiutas. They're looking off into the distance, and they can see this just pure havoc happening. And I love this part in the book because it also mentions that this is the first and only time that Proyas has seen Caiutas look worried. And we get all these great descriptions of Sebelwall just hacking and slashing and working his way through the masses, and schoolmen wreaking havoc, and then bright light. And this is where Sabon has refused to flee, so he like scales these parapets and up toward, like, he's next to Kellis, and he's gone fucking mad. But Sabon and his spearmen they're just killing Shrank and throwing them off the top. And I love what happens, how it describes it. It was something too bright to be light, too loud to be sound. And then Dagliash was gone, and so was Sabon's heartbeat. And this is another like, fuck, what? Are you sure? What? I mean, I know a bomb just went off, but are you sure Sabon's gone? But it's like it blasts him into another dimension, the fucking shadow realm, the past, whatever. It opens up something where Sabon, while he's dying, he sees his younger self. And this is twisted, delicious, great, all that, because it really ends on that little cliffhanger note where when he finally realizes that he's putting eyes on himself as he's falling, he's trying to warn his younger self. And it cuts out like right there at that part, right, where he's trying to, don't trust him. Oh, it's so good. And we get that beautiful description of the radiating concussions and the rings of smoke and fire, and just, god damn, Bakker just blew up a goddamn bomb in a fantasy setting. Slow clap. It's hard to believe that the book's not over yet, right? Then we pop over to the Demoa Mountains with Akamian and Mymara and our two Dunyain characters. And this is kind of interesting because we get, once again, more insight into the survivor. We really get to flesh out that last bit of his backstory. And we're really getting hit with that repetitive stuff, the cuts and cuts and cuts. And you, for whatever reason, even like I said earlier, these Dunyain are so tricky, man, and some of their backstory is tragic, so you can feel for them even if they are very deceptive motherfuckers. And speaking of that, along this little journey here, the survivor has been like witnessing Akamian and Mymara and kind of analyzing them, and he's even thinking himself, it's only a matter of time before I control these guys. But he's also started to notice that they're able to keep this voracious pace, and he knows it's because of this Kiri magic. He doesn't really know what the Kiri is, but he knows it's the stuff that they're consuming which is really keeping them going. Eventually, the survivor is confronted by Mymara's judging eye, and this definitely throws a wrench in things. The judging eye essentially flips all the everything that the survivor understands. Like, he begins to understand the faults in the Dunyain logic. And he really goes bananas in his head. His mind is just whirling, man. And he's coming up with this whole deal, right? Like, he has this talk with Mymara and whatnot. This whole thing plays out where he's decided, or he's come up for somehow in his head, he's done the math, that the only way to reach the absolute is through death. So he's seeking death now because that's how he's going to reach the absolute. The Logos and the Dunyain, they got it wrong. The survivor finally figures it out. So he essentially commits suicide by taking the Kiri from Mymara. And Akamian catches this too late. It's too late. The survivor is dying. And we get that little bit, where he, retched and lost his bowels or whatnot there on the mountain. And Akamian is pissed at Mymara at first because he's just like I said earlier, Akamian's got all that shit going on in his head, and one reason to keep the survivor alive is because he might very well have something to do with this prophecy. And then right after this, Akamian sees the blast, the light from the blast from Dagliesh. Now we go back to the River Sursa, and we're picking up with Proyas, and he's really dealing with the fallout of Dagliesh, and the people that have fled the battle are starting to show up. He's seeing some of the witches, he's seen Sacharis come back, and we know that Sacharis had that little one-on-one with Oiranel there back in the battle, but that's besides the point. Proyas is beginning to worry, and he's asking people, have you seen him? Have you seen the Aspect Emperor? He's, freaked out about Kellis's well-being, and which is funny. But anyway, Kellis shows up, takes Proyas, whisks him away. And this whole little, conversation that happens between Kellis and Proyas is kind of sad, and it's just more shit that Proyas is going to have to hold on his shoulders. And Kellis tells him about somewhat about the fallout from this bomb and what it's going to do in this land that is tainted, and these people, what he's going to have to do with some of these people now in the Great Ordeal. Kellis tells him that he's going to have to cull the blind and the sick. And he also tells them that these conversations that they've been having along the way, in many ways, were shaping him for this moment, because Proyas is going to have to lead the Great Ordeal without Kellis. And this is when Kellis disappears. But then we see that Proyas does take control, which I was wondering which way, is Proyas just going to fall to pieces, or is he going to take command? And he does take command. And we begin to see this kind of separation where the Great Ordeal is now split into two. And we get the kind of hit with the scalded part, right? The men and women that have survived this whole thing and are all fucked up from radiation. Their skin is sloughing off. They're blind or just have oozing wounds and whatnot. And what essentially ends up happening is the scalded kind of build a community here in this tainted land. And we get this part with Sebawul, and I love it. I'm not even sure what the fuck is going on with my homeboy, but it's like he's being called somewhere, right? He's just looking off into the distance, and then he just starts traveling off in that distance. And he doesn't, but unbeknownst to him, he doesn't even know. He is, like I said, it's like he's being called, so he doesn't even notice that he's got a gathering of of people coming behind him. And he goes to cross the water, right? And it talks about how this is an impossible deal. It never would have been able to happen, but the water is still. It's like a miracle, and then Siba will crosses, and he's also able to step on bodies and shit like that, and everyone is just following him. And this is some weird, dark, biblical kind of shit. I don't know. I'm just like, I cannot wait to see what Siba Wu is up to. Now we're going back to the New Empire. We pick up with Kel Momus and his sister Thaliopa, and they're basically having this little argument because Thaliopa, once again, is confronting her little brother. And I gotta say, guys, before I get too far into this, Thaliopa, I always sympathize with Thaliopa. Her stutter and everything kind of made her feel less confident than the rest of her brothers and sisters. And there was just this piece of me that always went out to, like, sympathize with her. Those tricky Dunyan, right? But in this confrontation where she's kind of trying to call out her little brother, he flips the script on her, and we kind of get this little information that she's been raped by her other brother in Relatus. It's heartbreaking. She's the way that they talk about this, they're kind of disconnected from their emotions, right? So the way she describes it is too calm and cool. It's like I said, it's just fucking heartbreaking. But amongst this time, right, Kel Momus is freaked out because he realizes he's lost track of the Narinder assassin. He tries to go chasing and finding him. When he finally eventually does, he finds him with his sister Thaliopa. And Thaliopa, the balls on this girl, man, she is confronting the Narinder assassin. She has gotten the information out of Kel Momus. She knows that he's the White Luck warrior, and she's calling him out. She's like, what, you're going to test your skill against an Anatsarember? And the White Luck warrior is like, there is no skill in what I do. And Thaliopa's like, so what, I'm already dead? Who are you? And then the White Luck warrior, cold as ice, man. He's just like, I'm just a guy that was here when it happened. Whoo! And then it happens. We see the earthquake happen, and I didn't even know what the fuck was going on, man. I was like, what? Huh? What? Kel Momus is shaking up in the vents as he's spying. The fucking place is collapsing, and the bookshelf falls on Thaliopa and fucking kills her. And it's like, damn. The Narinder assassin was right. He was just a guy that was there when it happened. What the fuck? Then we cut to Finale Cascamandri, Malawibi, and Satma Nanaferi, and we start to understand what the hell is actually going on. Finale doesn't really know, and Malawibi's not sure, but Satma knows. It's the mother. The gods are causing these earthquakes. And this is, like I said, Satma got some power, man. The gods are really backing her, and now her terrifying force is really on display here, and Momin is being shook from head to toe. But during all this, I love the little argument that's happening, because Finale Cascamandri does not want to believe it's the gods. He wants to believe it's in the one and only God, and that it's because of him and his mission and all this. And Satma's like, no, it's because of the mother, and they're going at it, right? This is so funny because they're really in a position to win, but yet they're bickering. I fucking love it. Then Kellis shows up, and fuck me, right? This is so great. Like, he kills Finale. He takes, like, Satma. What does he do? Like, fucking teleports away. Then, like, he's back again, and she's, like, way the fuck up in the air, falling down, screaming, "Mother!" Splat. Then we move over to Esmenette, and we find that she has discovered Thaliopa's dead body. And this is pretty heartbreaking, guys. Like, there's this line in here that Esmenette is like, she is fucking done, man. She's losing all her children. Her fucking mind is bent just to the brink. And she's screaming, because she knows it's the gods. She knows at this point that the gods are killing her children, and she screams at them. She says, you take nothing from him when you take his children. And that is so fucking sad. So fucking sad. And these are like the little things that kind of get me really pissed off at fucking Kellis, right? And make me sympathize with Esmenette. Then we move back to Kellis, and he gets in this whole battle with the last Kisharim, because Meppa shows up, and Malawibe is holding that fetish in his hand. And I believe that that's the whole deal. That's the whole reason why Meppa is able to stay alive without Satma, is because Malawibi has the fetish in his hand, I believe. I don't know. Could be confused. Either way, this is a badass battle, guys. We see that whole sorceress showdown between the last Kisharum and the Aspect Emperor, but let's face it, who's got the juice? Kellis. Then we get the shot of Esmenette, and she's, losing her shit, and then Kellis shows up. And he tells her, she's like, why are you here? And he tells her that he's here to save her and to salvage what he can. And this is an interesting moment, right? Because then she starts like fucking crying, and he's like, Esme, what did you do? And we get this like fucking multi-perspective showdown, and it's Kellis, his son, Kelmomis, and the Narender. And Kelmomis, basically at this point, he wants fucking Kellis to die too. Basically, Kellis is in his way as well, and so he's decided to join up with the four-horned brother. And when they're all in this room, Kelmomis shouts out to his dad to distract him so he could give him the Narender one up on his father, but it doesn't work out. It doesn't work out, right? Fucking. But this whole thing is very chaotic, and I'm not exactly sure what the fuck happened. Because the ceiling is coming down. There's stones going everywhere. Like, the White Luck Warrior is dead, right? But not only that, is Kelmomis dead? Did he die in this fucking rubble? Now, before the chapter even ends off, though, we also get this little sinister part where Kellis makes that Malawibi clone, right? And sends him back home to, like, on a fucking, like, kill, seek, and destroy mission. And that's just, fucking... Woo! Twisted. Now we're going back to the Demoa Mountains with the Crab Hand Boy, Akamian, and Mimara. Now, as they're pushing forward, they're beginning to hear shrank cries, ones that are different than normal. And I love this little bit of information that Akamian gives us when he's telling the crew that it's like, these cries are made by the shrank to give their human allies safe passage. And this is when we begin to meet the Skilvendi. And we think it's Nair at first, but it's not. It's Blueface, this Skilvendi who is actually one of the few. And we see that the crab-handed boy takes Mimara and Akamian and whisks them away, only in a way that the Dunyain could, and he tries to hide them. But they are found eventually by Blueface, and they are basically taken back to this Skilvendi, war party bonfire, where Akamian kind of loses it for a second, and he just is like, fuck it, be done with it, kill us already. And one of the Skilvendis approaches him, and he's like, well, you're a sorcerer of rank. What are you doing out here? And Akamian replies, I'm searching for Ishwal and the truth. And we hear from the background, lies. Now, when I read this line, I already knew who this was going to be. I knew it was going to be my dude, Nair. I knew it. I just knew it. Well, I already knew that he was going to be in this book. I think that his name is in the list of characters, one way or the other. I knew that Nair was going to be in this book, and it is kind of funny because me and my buddy Evan were making the jokes, like, it was because he kept asking me if Nair had popped up yet. I'm like, no, not yet. No, not yet. We eventually made the joke that he was going to pop up in the last page. Well, it wasn't the last page. But goddamn, Bakker, you took your time. But anyway, we begin to get the most beautiful kind of dialogue that only we can get when Nair is on the fucking page. And it's as he's walking up, he's just like, oh, is Drusus Akamian dead as well? And Akamian kind of fires back. He's like, what, you're working for the consult now? Which, of course, Nair fires back, let it all burn. Akamian calls him a fool, and Nair slaps him, and he's like, you think this is a reunion of old friends? What brings you out here with your pregnant woman? And Akamian tells him, the truth! Now, Nair's reply is so gangster, because he scoffs, and he's just like, truth? Which truth is that? The one that makes toys of nations and schools? Or the one that fucks your wife breathless? Akamian's just like, no. And Nair begins to laugh, and he just says, even after so many years, he still holds you in his pocket like a mouse. And Akamian again is just, no. Nair fires back, hatred. You cannot see this because you are weak. You cannot see this because you dwell here. Your own eye escapes you, and you plead ignorance, say excuses, tell tales. You hide from the truth in your own voice. You foul the very spigot that you try to clear. but I can see it clearly. I see it as clearly as a Dunyain, Mandati, that hatred has brought you here. And Akamian fires back, I do hate Kellis, but I hate the consult more. And he also fires back about Serwa, and he's like, hey, who's the mouse in whose pocket? And Nair replies, how can I be the gull when they do my bidding? Akamian, of course, says, so that's it, huh? A consult slave? And Naor is just like, I would have let you live. And Mara all of a sudden pops up, and she's like unleashing on Naor real quick. You are not of the people, always thinking one thought too many. And Naor kind of laughs, and he's like, yes, you do resemble her. So things have been getting really heated, and we get this little moment where things have essentially cooled off. And Akamian is talking to the Serwa's skin spy, and I love it because he's just like, so are you his keeper? And she looks at him, and she's like, if I wasn't his, I'd be yours, Chigra. And I was just like, whew, what does that mean? Then we get that back and forth between Nair and Akamian, and Nair tells him, like, tell me, am I mad? Because he knows that Akamian went searching for Ishwal. But amongst this conversation, too, Nair finds out that Ishwal was under attack. And then also he starts to kind of understand this whole thing with Mara and the judging eye and what exactly it does. And then he finds out that she has used it on him. And this is that moment, right? Nair is like, well, tell me what you see. And it's like, Akamian's just looking at her like, fucking lie to him. Tell him a lie. Don't tell him the truth. Don't fucking say the truth, girl. God damn it. No, don't. And she tells him the truth. And it's just like, oh, shit. She tells Nair, I have never seen one as damned as you. Now, it's also during this part where Nair is also obviously taken interested in the crab hand boy, and he notices how he looks. Because I guess I forgot to mention this. The crab hand boy is Kellis. He's Kellis's grandson because he's the survivor's kid, right? So this is an Anasarimber child from what I understand. And Nair understands that as well. And I love the deal like where he fucking flicks the knife at the kid to because he knows if he's Dunyain, he's got the reflexes, and the kid catches it. And all fucking just shit breaks loose. Serway's skin spy is on the loose. Poor little crab boy is running for his life, being chased by the goddamn Inkoroi. Ain't life the pits? I love this part too that we get, like where Nair starts to laugh and he tells Akamian she sees too much to see anything. But you, sorcerer, you are a fool. Then we kind of fast forward just that little bit when the skin spy Serway is coming back and she realizes that Nair let them go. She even comments on this and kind of asks what the wizard or what the sorcerer told him. And he tells her that he told him that he needs to fathom her loyalties. And this whole thing is kind of sad, fucked up, whatever you want to call it. Because there is this emotional connection between Serway the Skin Spy and Nair Erskiotha. He asks her what happened to the Anasarimber, and she tells him that he got away, and he's just like, how can I trust you? This is when she tries to kind of do that seduction kind of thing that she normally does on him, and it works, but it doesn't. He crushes her fucking windpipe and lets her lifeless body drop to the floor. Then we cut to Akamian and Mara, and they're running, and Mara is kind of having a hard time with leaving the crab hand boy behind. But Akamian's the only one there. He's just like, look, Mara, he's Dunyain. He can take care of himself. Because really, at this point, Akamian is also very worried, more so for just him, her, and the baby. He doesn't give a shit about the Dunyain. Like, his father, like, paternal instincts are starting to kick in, but they're for his own kid, not somebody else's. Akamian and Mara begin to kind of argue again, and then we get that little bit of, like, Nair, like, talking to Akamian, but he's not really there. We just get that little bit of Nair dialogue, and then Akamian kind of slipping into that dream, right? That, like, crazy dream. He's being yanked by a chain. There's a ceiling of fire. There's naked non-men. There's a hammer, fires upon fires. And I love this description about how his empty reflection knew the fire. It wore it like a wig of hell. And then we get that next bit where he's walking over glass and he sees that mighty sarcophagus. Once again, Bakker cutting it short, little cliffhanger status. The sarcophagus, right? Ooh. But Akamian wakes up and he's gasping and he is scared shitless because he knows the second apocalypse has begun and the world is fucked. And my mom was kind of like, "Are you okay?" He's like, "You okay?" And he's like, "It'll be okay. Everything's gonna be okay if we just believe." Oh man, I tell you guys, what a goddamn just emotional energy dump, all kinds of shit, man. At the end of this book, I was wrecked and just ravaged in the best ways. I mean, Bakker has that's the beauty of Bakker, right? He leaves you compromised in the way that you kind of want to be compromised. You're just reeling in all this dark and dastardly shit. And yeah, I mean, come on. You guys don't need to know. I mean, you already know. Gush. I love him. I do have to admit, like, once again, this was the most challenging of all his books. It really did make me work and then work some more. And I gotta say, I can't wait to do my reread of this whole series because I'm sure I'm gonna catch just crazy loads of more shit. We all know that Bakker can weave infinite amount of fucking layers within his stories, and it's just glorious in such an epic way. I'll never get enough. So I'm going to keep going back and keep finding new shit and keep loving it, man. Just like I know some of you Bakker Pac-Mans do. I love it when I hear you guys talking about, "Oh, I'm on my 10th reread." I'm like, fuck, you guys are just amazing. This is what you are. So, guys, hopefully you enjoyed this, got something out of it, whether it was, information or just good old laughs at me trying to say these fucking names. I know it's got to be comical because I literally have 2 to 3 names for each character. Like Sirwe, Nayer, Nayor, Kellis, Kelhus, fucking, just hang in there with me, all right? Just hang in there. Like I said, guys, hopefully you enjoyed this. This is probably my longest one like the last one was. This is a record. I actually had to get a dummy battery so I wouldn't run out of fucking batteries. This thing still took me all goddamn day to record, and I hope you appreciated it just a little bit. That's all I need, just a little bit. All right, guys? I am extremely excited to be getting into the last book of the Aspect Emperor series, but I'm also extremely depressed. I'm going to be picking it up very soon. I wanted to film this before I broke into it, and now, boom, we're filled. It's all filmed, and it's done. I got to do the spoiler-free review because I did this one first. I wanted to get this shit off my chest, and I just finished Blood Meridian. So, guys, the Unholy Consult is coming my way in all its dark glory, and I cannot fucking wait. And trust me, all you guys on the Bakker forums and the fucking TSA cast and all this shit, I am going to be devouring so much Second Apocalypse shit after I finish the series. There's so much stuff out there that is just spoiler nation that I don't want to touch. I'm trying to stay clear of, but once I finish, oh boy, am I jumping in. And get ready for my loud mouth in all your forums, all right? All right, but until then, let's just, practice a little patience. I will see you at the Unholy Consult. Peace. And truth shines.